There we go. Hi, everybody. This is Zoph. You're watching Simply SCAdian, no title required. And we have an awesome guest this week, but to prep us for talking with her, I'm going to hand things off to Lucas while I do my geek girl stuff.
Hi, guys. Welcome to Simply SCAdian, no title required. As always, the mission is to bring you people from throughout the SCA who have not gained their peerage yet, but certainly have a wealth of knowledge in their particular area. And we want to bring those people to you so that you know that in your particular area, your particular corner of the gnome world, that you could reach out to people who may not be peers, but are certainly experts in their field and gain a lot of knowledge. So once again, I invite you, I entreat you, I implore you to go to the Facebook page and sign up, fill out that form. If you, or more importantly, if somebody that you think we should talk to is out there in the gnome world. Now, again, Soph and I are mid and East Kingdom respectively. But we want to talk to people from all over the gnome world. So hit us with your best shot. Tonight, we have with us Seraphina Macherante, and I'm just going to switch my screen here so I can read this. Has been in the SCA a long time, and we were just talking about what a long time meant. And she's done many things. She's lived and played in 10 kingdoms, and so I'm sure we're going to talk about that. And is currently in our Artemisia, but is playing in Kaid. She got started in the SCA by making horse barding for a friend attending Gulf Wars, and was talked into going so that she could see her work. After that, she was asked to teach a few garb classes at a local event, and before long, like most of us, she was hooked. She still loves making garb, and making Elizabethan dresses are her favorite. Seraphina shoots archery and was recently added to Greenwood Company. She finds that archery to be a great way to get out there and meet new people. She's a willow in mask making and loves everything about masks and trying to A&S with masks whenever she can. She says she thinks her biggest achievement in the SCA is making around 2,000 embroidered pandemic masks for all over the known world. And recently, she's been active in the SCA TikTok culture and really enjoys sharing her garb and working with everyone. Seraphina has made lots of garb for the SCA, including for Royals, and is always looking forward for her next project, but is currently still booked a year out. So welcome to the show, Seraphina. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great. Super excited.
I was just thinking, I think I have my mask somewhere, somewhere in the house, so I would go grab it and show it off to people. But go ahead.
So as always, we're going to start with the first question, and that is, how did you find the SCA?
Well, as stated in the little blurb, I got started by making horse barding for a friend of mine going to Gulf Wars. And that was a really fun process. And is the last horse barding, funny enough, that I made for the SCA, although I've made it for theaters now all over. And when I got done, they asked me to come to Gulf Wars so that I could see it. And that was kind of it. Gulf Wars was amazing. It's one of my favorite SCA events. I love going. And everybody was really receptive of my work, and very quickly after that started asking me to teach classes on sewing and those sort of things.
So in your mundane life, then you are a costumer then? Is that what, or you just work
So
for?
I'm not a costumer. I am a craft fabrication artist. So I make things like mascot costumes, animal heads, Mrs. Potts from Beauty and the Beast, that sort of thing. Very big, large fabrications.
I saw
Awesome.
you just posted that you're making a kiss for Willy Wonka.
I am. I am.
So when you made the barding, what was the materials?
Wait a minute. Can we first define what is horse barding?
Okay. All right.
Oh, sure. So horse barding is the decorative fabric that kind of like goes around the horse with the dagging, and sometimes your reins are decorated and you have the plumage that goes on top. They all have different names, but I just call it all barding, which is incorrect but easy. And so basically for what I made was the part that goes under the saddle that drapes over that looks really pretty. So I made it out of gabardine at the time because it's a cotton gabardine. So that's good for the horse and it's very sturdy so that they can machine wash it as needed. But it had pretty dagging and stripes. That kingdom was Meridies at the moment, so I don't even really remember who it was for or what group or whatnot. But Tara was her mundane name, my friend, and yeah, it was great. I got to pattern a horse, and I learned a lot. And funny enough, to years later, then use it in my career.
Wow.
So are you a horse person at all? Do you ride horses?
I cannot ride horses because of health reasons.
Wow.
Otherwise, I would. I would have to learn how to ride side saddle because I can't actually like sit on a horse.
Yeah, I feel like we have a whole other show here. So I'm in my mundane life. I'm a theater director and whatnot. And funny enough, for 4 years for a professional for a semi-pro baseball team, I was a mascot. So
That's funny.
I'm like all those things. I'm like, oh, I know all like that kind of stuff. Plus, I was a Ren Fair guy, so horses and barding and all that kind of stuff. I'm down with too. So then 10 different kingdoms. So can you kind of take us on that little tour of how you kind of got from
Oh
there?
gosh, all 10 off the top of my head, not really. But let me see if I can try. Let me look up the kingdoms in 2 seconds, and I can definitely do that for you. Okay, so I started off in Meridies, and so which is now Glenaubins, the part that I was in. And then I ended up moving to actually Meridies and then back to Glenaubin. So I kind of like just hopped over from like Gulfport area to Mobile with the Barony of Osprey there. And got to teach classes and stuff. And so it's an easy drive to like go back and forth between the two kingdoms. I shortly after that moved to Trimaris, and because I was working out in Vero Beach for a while. A really great group of people there. I still talk to a lot of them. The East happened, Dreckenville happened. I used to work for the Moscow Ballet, so that was a lot of fun. So a lot of my work has what's hopped me around. So I've got the West Kingdom. I was out in Thailand for a really long time. Mid-Realm, Artemisia, Kaid. I don't know if that was all 10, but close enough.
So which was your favorite? Mid-realm.
You can't ask me that.
No.
My household is in the mid-realm, and I've been treated to the mid-realm this whole time until about a month ago. So we're going to go with mid-realm.
Yes, winning. So what is you in the mid-realm, you've received 2 awards. The Willow.
I've received a couple of awards in the mid-realm.
Okay, but I want to talk about the 2 that were mentioned by Lucas in your blurb, which is Willow. What is the Willow?
So the Willow is like the second tier ANS. No, the Willow is the first tier ANS award in mid-realm. And so I got that for mask making. Super excited about it. Vukasin and Count Vukasin and
The Duchess now, Calic and Vukasin.
Duchess. And yes, they awarded me the Willow, which is very sweet, in mask making.
And then you are a member of the Greenwood Company.
I am. That happened a couple Pinsics ago, 2 or 3, and then the pandemic happened, so now it's all fuzzy. But
tell us what is a Greenwood Company?
Greenwood Company is currently the highest archery achievement that you can get in the mid-realm. It's comparable, I think, to the white bracers and several other kingdoms. There are some kingdoms that have similar awards, but it's that highest archery one that you can get currently.
So how did you get into archery? Was that something that you fell into at Gulf Wars, or did that happen later?
So it happened when I moved to the mid realm and I needed something that was not sewing. I had burnt out on making garb. I was tired of teaching classes. Um, and masks I do out of love, but it's not always the most understood. So it's hard to like A&S with one. And so I just needed something that wasn't theatrical. And someone suggested that I shoot archery, and I met a plethora of wonderful humans that really helped me get started and mentored me along the way.
So with the Greenwood Company, then is that just it's just an honor for archery, or is it like a combat archery group, or kind of a
It
combination?
is for target archery. It is not for combat archery.
Okay.
I don't believe. And I don't do any fighting. I don't do combat. I again, due to health reasons, I stay away from all of that. So it's target archery, and also crossbow.
Okay. So does that figure into your persona at all? Because I know I didn't mention the persona in the thing because I figured we would talk about it. So I definitely want to get into your persona. Does that figure into it, or how did
It
you kind of
doesn't.
yeah.
So the archery is literally something that I needed to do to have a thing, kind of a way. When you're in the SCA for so long, you have to try new things to like rekindle that SCA spirit. And it came at a time that I really needed to rekindle it. And I met so many people. So no, it actually doesn't have much to do with my persona at all. It's just for me.
So what is your persona?
So Seraphina is an Italian mask maker who uh, immigrated, for the lack of a better word, to Russia. I'm in a Russian household. And there is a very short period in Italian history where, I'm Jewish, which is important to this story. There's a very short time in Italian history where they told all of the Jewish people to come. They're like, we want you, you're great. Everywhere else is kicking you out. Italy's got your back. And so we all moved to Italy. And then we became bankers and got lots of money. And then Italy decided we had too much money. So they created Getty's and told we had to move out to Getty's. And in that, there were so many rules, like you could only work in the actual town part for so many days, and then you had to go back. And so a lot of people left and went to Spain and Russia and those areas of the world.
So
Poland. That's where a lot of Polish Jews came from.
So your name, though, you said something about the name means I'm sorry, I'm looking.
Angelic mask maker.
Angelic mask maker. So let's talk about masks then.
Yeah.
So is that again, let's talk about how you got into it and then how it kind of fits into the overall ANS
Sure.
So masks in general, just your love of it. How did you get started with it?
I started with the Plague Doctor, which is a whole long conversation ball game that I teach a class on, and how it's not SCA, period. So it started with that and kind of morphed both professionally and SCA wise into a love of the history of it. My dissertation academically is in the evolution of European masking. So like how we got from one point to another point. So that's kind of how it started. I was doing a lot of historical research for my dissertation. I used masks a lot mundanely for work, and it was a natural progression to see what it was like in these earlier times. The whole angelic, the name, which was the first part of this question, I was at an event in Trimaris. And I was teaching a class, and I don't even remember what it was on, but I had a circlet on because Meridia's didn't have circlet rules. Trimaris does. It was an issue. It got brought up. I said something snarky, like we all do. And it was my first event in Trimaris. And someone made a comment back that wasn't very angelic of me. And so that is where Seraphina came from, was a snarky comment about a circlet because I didn't have an AOA in a new kingdom at a first event. And then the mask maker part came way later. I was in mid-realm and I needed to finish out my SCA name because I'd never officially finished it. I knew at that time that masks was going to be my ANS. That was going to be my thing. So Conrad looked forever to find a way to get mask maker as my second part. Funny enough, I was asked what my entire SCA name was because they were putting me up for an AOA.
So I'm fascinated by masks, and I really want to pick your brain because, you know, when you and I got to be friends, it was when you were baronial bard in Brendoken, which is, I mean, I just know you and I just admired you for so long. So when we look at mask making in period, first of all, why would people wear masks? Where does this idea of masking come from, or is that too broad a question?
It's a very broad question, but I think I can narrow it down to the intent. So masking in different cultures all throughout the world, but specifically in Europe, comes from either politics, religion, or play. So like children and whatnot. So that's really the three things that you have. It's politics, religion, and entertainment. This stems from, in my theory, which there are many theories, but this is what my dissertation is, in my theory, is that it stems from the beginning with Dionysus and some of the festivals in what's now Turkey, and how that then informed through migration, the Greek masks, so on and so forth. But really, even in modern day, that's what you get as the motivators. It's either political, religious, or some type of like theatrical or child's play. And you see that reflected quite a bit through the different masks to be made, whether it's Carnival, which all three of those are entered into Carnival. You get LGBTQ politics in masks with Carnival, with the Gato, which is a cat. You get political statements with the Bayuta, which is a mask that you had to be a citizen eventually to Italy to wear, and a lot of royals and nobles wore it to kind of downplay their station so that they could be among the common. Also, a lot of murderers used it because it hid their identity and crime skyrocketed. And then you have some neat things where you see leather masks that a shoe cobbler made in what's now Russia to make children's masks that children could run around with the leftover leather from boot making. And there's several examples of that. My personal favorite are the Starcard dig, which is a dig in near Yorkshire, and it portrays antler. It's an antler mask that's literally made out of a deer's head, that they think was a ritualistic masks. And you can also see evidence of them on the cave drawings in France, which is some of the oldest cave drawings. You see that the antler masks are portrayed there, which also coincide with the berserker and some Irish mask depictions as well with the antlers. You can track these antlers from Dionysus all the way through. But the most evident, physical, tangible evidence we have is from the Starcard dig, which is very documented and just fantastic what's come from it. Big SCA ANS goals is to go get a deer, go hunting, get a deer, and like start to finish make one. one day.
So when we talk about masks, sorry, Lucas, I know it's your turn, but I'm jumping on the train here. So when we talk about masks, most of us think about just facial coverings, that just the eyes are showing, for example, right?
Hmm.
So when you talk about this find, was it a full face mask or
No, we would think of it more like a helmet or a headdress. So like it sits about here and you have the eyes and that you have the antlers. But it's still mask, its quantifier is a little ambiguous when you get to early periods of what actually categorizes as a mask. And they have scholars have agreed that if it fully encompasses, then it's a hood, like what we think of the plague doctor mask, but the actual one, which again is a whole other thing, is a hood, because it goes all the way behind. It's categorized as a mask if it's the face, or if it's a partial mask, which is more like a headdress, if it has eyes carved out. If the eyes aren't carved out, then it is a headdress. If the eyes are carved out, then it is a mask. But again, that's a lot of like nitpicking between academic scholars and what would they say counts.
So you have your goal to kind of recreate this one from the dig. What kinds of masks have you made, and what are some projects that you're particularly proud of?
So I have made period face castings. So that's using the substituting for safety some things. I did it on a mannequin head, not a person. But doing a live cast, how they would have done that in period, which is kind of like the basic of masking. You have to have something first that you can mold the mask on top of. And we get that actually from the painters guidelines, like the I would say union. There's a painter's guideline book from then, and from Italy, from the late period for SCA. And so it had like all the instructions on how to do it. So that was fantastic to get to do. One of my favorites. You can see it on my Facebook mask page. So with that, I have recreated in my research of the plague doctor, I've recreated that several times. And we keep getting new information on it, which is great. However, the new information keeps discrediting everything that we know as we know it. So even though I've put a lot of heart and effort into it, it doesn't really fit in the SCA timeline categories. But that is a labor of love that I've done. And I'm currently working on what's referred to as a muta mask. That's kind of like the nickname of it. The other name's in Italian, and I would butcher if I tried. It's also called something else in England and in France and in several other places, but in my place in Italy, muta. But it's a black velvet oval shaped mask that's got the eyes out, and it's got a bead on the inside that the person to hold the mask on bites the bead, so they can't talk, hence muta. And so high born women would wear them partially as a sunscreen protection. And so if they went out, they would have this mask that they held on by biting on this bead.
So we've kind of danced around it a little bit, and I'm sure it's a much longer conversation, but so the plague doctor mask that everybody knows that, shows up everywhere, it's not in period for SCA. So where does that actually lie? And then what is really the plague doctor that would fit in period?
So it's even more interesting that, so it's just outside of SCA period if we go with what we understand. And there's a lot of academic chatter about when that exact date is, but we all seem to agree it's somewhere in the mid 1619 and beyond. So the 1700s. So just outside of SCA period. And we thought we had 2 extant examples of it from that time that correlated with the descriptions from Charles de Lorraine, and I'm pretty sure I'm butchering that, it's French. And he's credited with inventing it, which is also not really true because there's evidence of nosed apparatuses in Rome for doctors as well. So this is kind of like a building of a building. It's based quasi off of an executioner hood with a nose attached. So that kind of gives you an idea of what it actually looks like. An executioner head with this straight beak with 2 holes under it. The 2 excellent examples that we thought we had have in this past 5 years been disproven. So there's I've been working with a researcher, she's great, in the German Museum of History and Medicine. And her article, again, that we had talked through, was recently published, I think 2 years ago, somewhere in the middle of COVID, because it was a COVID related that got added into it. That's all about these 2 extant examples. And one of them, come to find out, hadn't even been worn ever. Like the inside, like, was still fine. There was no evidence of a human ever having actually worn it. And if they had, the eyes are too far apart to actually see through. So there were a lot of indicators that this may not exactly be that. And then the other one that we have an example of, the fabrics that it's made out of, none of them are listed as medical fabrics used at that time. So that's the understanding is if they weren't a medical fabric, then it wasn't a medical device. So it wouldn't have been a plague mask. And to even bring further to the front, wearing a mask during times of plague was against the law. You could not cover your face because people were afraid that you were hiding pock marks and plague marks. So you weren't allowed to wear a mask. But yeah, it's really interesting. The pattern that I got was that I made for the mask for my ANS was from high-res photos of me and her going back and forth between one of the thought to be extant examples. But the more we learn, the more we find that this really, not that it wasn't a thing, but our understanding of it is incorrect.
So I'm fascinated at the thought of medical fabric. And this is just such a typical SCA thing, right? The rabbit hole of you're into researching masks, and then you're like, oh, wait, there's a completely different level of fabric that was only used for medicinal. Tell me about this.
So I'm not as big of an expert on the fabric portion, but I will do my best. So my understanding is leathers were used for medical. Waxed linen was used, and beyond that, I'm sure there's a couple of others, but those are the 2 big ones. Which, when you hear about the plague doctor, you hear about the wax coat and such, but the actual fabric that this one mask was didn't exist. And in fact, for a long time, we thought that before this other one was discovered, we thought that the plague doctor mask itself was made out of leather, and it's not. The extant example that we have, again, that is now been discredited, was made out of velvet and then was waxed on the inside.
Now, again, this is my limited knowledge of plague masks in general, is that I had always heard that the end of the nose piece, for lack of a better word, was stuffed with either a sponge soaked in vinegar or some kind of herbs and whatnot. Is that still a thing, or was that a later period?
No, that's still a thing. And in fact, that's what that part can be proven, mainly because the doctors in Rome were doing that at some point. So we think that was snagged from the doctors in Rome to utilize, and that was so that they could be hands-free. Whereas before, my understanding is that they had them on a stick, like an apple on a stick, that they could then have so that the humors wouldn't get them. But yes, so that we do know for sure. And in fact, the recipes for that and what actually goes in it is written down by several sources just later than the 1700s. Especially when you get to the Spanish plague, again, that happened much later. There is much more evidence that these became a thing. So I'm not saying plague doctors didn't exist. I'm just saying that our understanding of when and how is not quite there yet for where we would want to be, especially for how popular something is.
Right. How do we find out? What are there more digs that should be done, or how do we find out?
Until we find something that we can have good providence on, art, let's discover a painting that has one earlier. That's not a satire, because the copper plate that everybody looks at, that's the nice raven's beak, that they're like, oh, this is it. It's a satire piece about Dr. Birdbeak. So you have the plague doctor mask, you have Dr. Birdbeak, which is the satire on the copper plate, which is actually making fun of the guy, Charles, that made it for the king at the time, Louis, whatever number that is. I don't know off the top of my head. So he was like, you're an idiot. This is dumb. And so the translation of the copper plate was done by Dr. Lindsay Fritz Harris, who is also a scholar specifically on the plague doctor and medicine. Wonderful human being, teaches out at Harvard. Which basically it's the story about a doctor that goes and rummages through the dead and the dying, swindles them of all of their money, like a raven looking for a dead kill on the side of the road. And so basically they're trolling each other through a copper plate. But the game creators of Assassin's Creed saw the plate and went, that's dope, and put it in their game. And that's how modern day we got the idea of the plague doctor, and the fact that in the 70s when they restarted Carnival, because Carnival actually stopped in Italy after Napoleon invaded, and he outlawed all masking and burned all the documents, which is why we don't have a lot, is because Napoleon came in and was like, y'all are wild frat partying, and that's why I could invade you. So we're going to do away with all this, burn all the receipts. This never happened. So thanks, Napoleon. And sorry, I got off track. When Carnival restarted in the 1970s, they created Dr. Birdbeak because it was popular. They thought it was going to be popular. And then that spun through then in I think the 90s when Assassin's Creed happened. And that's how we all relearned history wrong.
So how did all of this, writing a dissertation about this, how did that then apply to your life in the SCA?
So, as everybody that has entered in academia, writing a dissertation is very stressful. And the SCA really was my stress relief. It really was. And so if I got tired of something that I was doing academically, I could go build. One of those things was the gateau, the cat mask that I was talking about. It was so fascinating to read about it. I wanted to recreate it, and then I wanted to share it. Like, I'm learning all of these things, and I'm having to present it to a board of people that really don't care, to be able to then make it and present it as an ANS and have a minute amount of people go, oh my goodness, that history is amazing, let's talk about it, was really helped me get through the academic part in my real life. I mean, in my mundane life, if that makes any sense. Right. So I think the gateau was really what solidified that for me. And that was pretty early on, going to the mid-realm was when I made that. And I did I did a period casting. I did the clay on top. I molded the mask. I did it out of silk. Uh, it was pretty. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was pretty.
So what is the, I know you kind of tease the significance of that mask, but what is the significance of that particular mask?
Oh yeah. So I don't know if you ever heard of catcalling. Um, so it is actually the origin of that term, as I understand it. You have carnival, which, being a part of the LGBTQ community, anytime outside of carnival was punishable. It was outlawed. You could not do it. But during carnival, so many of those laws didn't apply because of the anonymity behind everything. You couldn't tell who these people were. So what a lot of the LGBTQ people did was they wore either a pig's mask or a cat mask. And if you wore a cat mask, so say you were a born male and you wanted to go find a partner, you would put the cat mask on, you would dress in feminine clothing, and you would get a basket full of kittens, and you would go find another cat, and you would catcall them. And if you were caught, because it's still illegal, but if you were caught, all you would say, oh, I got swept up in carnival. Carnival fever. It hit me. This won't happen again. Just blame carnival. And so that's how, and because carnival lasted for most of the year, that's how a lot of the LGBTQ community survived at that time.
Wow. All right, we have so much more that I want to talk about, and we only have like 23 minutes left. So let's talk about garb. How did mask making, or were you sewing already and then you got into mask making, or vice versa? How did that come about?
So the sewing happened because when I got started with the barding, I was going to undergraduate school and or getting ready to go into undergraduate school for historic restoration and textiles, with an emphasis in period with costuming and that whole 9 yards. So sewing started very early on in the process. I already knew how to sew. That came from dance and a whole lot of mundane life. And I really enjoyed teaching the classes in the SCA, like how to make buttons and put together, a Viking tunic and all that, that sort of thing. And it just snowballed from there. I found that I really enjoyed making Elizabethan and Italian outfits. And because I could make them, people would ask me to make them. And I just continued throughout a lot of my SCA career. In fact, I was gonna stop making them when I moved to the Mid-Realm. So we're like 4 kingdoms in now, and I was getting burnt out. But I started my first day at Brendoken. You'll find this really funny, Zoe, since you know everybody. My first meeting at Brendoken, Romvig and Caradwin and a couple other people that I don't remember were trying to finish Count Nikolai's coronation garb. And that they had gotten and was made too small. It wasn't adorned. Like there were just things that needed to happen before it could go on for coronation. And I walked up to Caradwin and Romvig, and I said, y'all don't know me. This is literally my first meeting. I just moved to the Mid-Realm, but I promise you I can fix this coat and make you a Russian coronation SCA worthy coat if you give it to me now. It was Thursday, coronation was Saturday.
Yeah. And
I rebuilt that sucker and delivered it early in the morning at coronation that Saturday. And that is what started it in the Mid-Realm was that. And I was able to get started with the Silver Thimble Guild and making things, and as I could, being able to make things for the Baron and Baroness and for different royals throughout my SCA career. But I feel like that's when I felt the community of the SCA. and how garb making could bring a community together. And that, I think that moment is what made what I can do and what I would like to do and those abilities have a relationship with people. Because that's what the SCA is people. It's not doing a thing and presenting a thing and showing a thing and getting the thing and all of it. It's none of that. It's the people. So you have to find a way to make your passions involvement with a community. And that jacket with Count Nikolai, that did it for me.
So
Because until then, I was just teaching a class and I was just making a thing, and it was all about me. And that was when it was no longer about me. It was about a bigger picture.
now you're part of Count Nikolai and Countess Serena's household, correct?
I am now. I was not then.
Yeah, but how did that come into being?
So I think that happened about 2 years later, actually. I was actually, it happened when Mistress Romveg became Mistress Romveg, when she was getting her laurel, getting awarded her laurel. After being in the SCA so long and never really having that connection that I just talked about, I was so impacted by how that connection was that I finally wanted to join a household. And I'd had a couple other households kind of broach the subject because I'd never even thought about it before. And I had a really internal conversation that no, if I join a household, I want it to be a part of the people that gave me that gift. And because I feel like I received so much more than what I gave in that moment. And so I had a conversation with Count Nikolai at Mr. Strombeck's elevation to if they thought I would be able to join the household. I had gone to Penzic and stayed with Penzic with them, the Penzic prior to that. And so unbeknownst to me, the household had already talked that if I had ever broached the subject that we would welcome me in, that they would welcome me in. So it snowballed pretty fast after that, but that was great. That's how that happened. So yes, now I'm in their household and I love it. That's what I don't think you can see them, but that's what that's my household.
That's Countess Serena's thing. She likes dragonflies.
Dragonflies, yeah.
I'll let you talk it all. Go ahead, Lucas.
That's fine. I did a lot of talking last week. So you make this coat, you're in the community now. Everybody knows that you make garb. So it seems to me like you then now just get orders and orders for garb. So talk a little bit about that, and then I have to ask you about Elizabethan because that's I'm right on that line with my persona of just like it's not quite SCA, but but so talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm quite casual about it. It does take me a long time to make them. So let me preface that if you were asking for something ever, it is going to take a long time. However, it really kind of just is I'll have someone that will see me at an event and go, oh my goodness, I saw the outfit that you made for so-and-so or such and such. Do you still do this? And then we'll have a great conversation. I had someone message me out of the blue a couple years ago that said, hey, a friend of mine is going to 12th night. This is the 12th night in Ontier, and was swindled a dress and out so much money. And Elizabethan was supposed to be a nicely made dress. The dress arrived and it was not what was agreed upon. And they asked, is there anything you can do to make this right? As the SCA, we need to have a better face than this. And I said, absolutely, send her my info. And I've now made 3 dresses for that human. But but she now contacts me to a lot of people in Ontario to make 12th Night, which is an Elizabethan focused pageantry event for Ontario, to make things out there. But it's definitely just word of mouth. And I made a doublet and plunderhosen for a client that came off of TikTok, because I'm making the garb on TikTok now. And so I'll have people reach out on TikTok to be like, hey, are you making anything? And I'll be like, not right now, but on X date, I'll probably put a message of, hey, I'm ready for new custom orders. And we'll talk through things like, what's your budget and what do you want and what period do you want? How period do you want it? Because I think that's very important in SCA is I can make you an Elizabethan gown that is 100% factual period, but that might not actually be for our modern society what we want. So just having that conversation with people, and being able to know the difference and help people understand that, which is great. I don't know if that actually answered your question. I'm so sorry.
Oh no, it totally did. Totally did. So then you get started with TikTok. So you like how long you've been doing that, and then like you do all the stuff you would do in your classes, in miniature on TikTok or
So yes and no. My TikTok is Brett Seraphina. So that's my modern name and my SCA name. And I go back and forth between stuff I make for the SCA and stuff that I make as a craft fabrication artist. So I didn't split the accounts. I've had some SCA people ask me to, and I'm thinking about it, but I haven't yet. I started at the pandemic, because I was making a lot of garb for people at the pandemic, because I was home and I had a lot more time, and people were wanting to see what I was doing. And so I think I started with an Elizabethan dress that I was making for a lovely lady in the mid-realm. So I was showing the embroidery and the buttons and whatnot. And they were like, well, we want to see the whole dress. So then I started showing the whole outfits and like how all of the pieces go together, because this was it could have been an A&S entry as like a historical dress. And so they really liked seeing like how all the layers go. And then I got asked, well, how do you make them? And I make a lot of my own patterns. I adapt some prefabricated patterns that are based on historical findings. But I systematically teach how to make one of the dresses that I'm wearing now. But you can follow that going through the TikTok, and then you can message me and ask questions. And I'm always willing to help, or Zoom or Skype or whatever, if anybody has questions or things. I've helped a lot of people make hats over Zoom during the pandemic. That was fun.
So what's next? We're almost out of time. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying I just followed you on TikTok. That's what I was doing. I was like, all right. You said it, I was like, where are you? And there you are. Okay, good.
So what's you in the last few minutes before the final question? Where do you see yourself going now in the SCA?
Well, I just moved again. Hopefully this time is permanent, like I'm done. I have a full-time job in Ivins, Utah, and I'm with the theater that I work at now. I'm really happy. So now I just need to start over and reconnect with a new kingdom. A lot of people don't realize that when you move to a different kingdom, you are literally restarting your entire SCA life. So it's like you have nothing. And so you have to remake those connections and find those moments again. So what I'm looking for now is to find the group of people that gave me that same connection that I got from making garb when I was in the mid-realm, which was one of my last kingdoms I lived in, was mid-realm-ish, somewhere around there. Anyways, somewhere in the middle of the 10. Actually, Lantia would have been the last one. Anyway, sorry, I'm wasting time. So that's what I would like now, is to find my community in the SCA here, which is a little more difficult because the closest group is 2 hours away. So it's a relearning the balance, and I'm finding that the online SCA is really helpful for me. So I get messages on my Facebook and on TikTok and privately to ask for help with things in different capacities, whether it's questions about masks because their event's going to have masks, or if there's a question about garb. That's my involvement right now, and it's kind of relearning how to adapt that. But the next big thing is to just start over.
Wow. All right, time for the final question, Lucas.
Okay, so then, as always, our final question: what can we as a society do better? Where could the SCA improve?
Without opening a big can of worms, EDI, inclusion, diversity. I can't tell you how many spaces I have gone across all of our kingdoms and not been able to do anything because ANS is up some stairs and there's no elevator, or everything is in one space. So you have all of the noise of the fighting with everything else going on. And if you're neurodivergent or have any type of noise processing issues, it's not sustainable. We have a problem with anti-Semitism. We do, point blank, we have it. I was at an event not too long ago where I was wearing my Star of David. I usually take it off. I forgot to take it off. And I got yelled at for having a chain and trying to be a knight. And I'm like, it wasn't about the chain. People were like, well, that's not a thing. It wasn't about the chain. I have low ANS awards across like 5 kingdoms. And I say that to say I should have another one, but this kingdom tried to give it to me on Yom Kippur, which I was only there because a friend of mine was being elevated to a pelican. I can't accept awards that day. And so when I said that I couldn't accept it that moment, it was taken that I was not accepting it at all, and it was announced that I refused the award. I was never given another award in that kingdom. So we have problems. And it starts with inclusion, diversity. It does.
I mean, you're not opening a can of worms necessarily. It's a common theme. We're in our 3rd season now. And when we ask that question, there are common themes. These are the things that we do need to address. So again, you're not alone in noticing that is a thing. It's and it's nice to hear it again, because hopefully we hear it enough and then we start doing something about it.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for being our guest tonight. I'm so glad. It was so wonderful to see your face, and good luck.
Absolutely. I miss y'all so much.
We miss you. We miss you, and good luck to you. You've been all over the country, if not the world at this point, and I hope you'll be settled down and now with your career and find.
I mean, but I kind of envy you. You have wonderfully unique perspective on the SCA, having gone to so much of it. That I envy that experience, certainly.
Yeah. Our next guest is somebody whose name I can't remember for the life of me, but he'll be with us.
We're so professional. We're so good at this. So good at this.
And the dude will be with us in 2 weeks, and he's a fighter. And he's been recommended by a lot of people, and he finally had his schedule clear so he can be our guest. And I'm not even going to try because it's been a long day, and yeah. So anyway. So Simply SCAdian, no title required, is what you've been watching. Any closing words, Lucas?
No, thank you so much, Seraphina, for joining us. This was wonderful.
It's really wonderful seeing your face. And we learned so much. That's why I love this show. Like, I've never thought I would learn this much about mask making. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. See everybody in 2 weeks.